All right, this is part 3 in my proclaimed nerd series on lifting. We started 2 sessions ago with Brandon Smitley out of Thirst and Terre Haute. Then we had Shane Sweat with the Sweatshop, who introduced the conjugate system to me. He's out of Cincinnati. Well, it all starts back at West Side Barbell. After the passing of Louie Simmons, Tom Berry took over, and he's been running it for about 2 years. And I met with him a couple times, and he was generous enough to be on the show today. It was with Louie 16 years. Louie ran West Side for 4 decades. So it all began there and has morphed out into other gyms, and it's come to my gym and many other places. So this is basically where it all started. So we're lucky to have Tom on today. Great stories, great insights. So hope you enjoy it. Gotcha. All right, welcome back to the Athlete Builder Podcast. I got Lucas in the library with me. I'm Jim Beebe. I'm the host, and today we're lucky to have Tom Berry, the head of West Side Barbell, with us today. So I'm just going to read a quick little snippet from Tom's bio, and it says, the late legendary Louie Simmons handpicked Tom to carry forward the legacy of West Side Barbell. Under the mentorship of the iconic Louie Simmons, Tom is poised to usher in a new era for West Side Barbell. His mission is to ensure that the business and gym thrive while innovatively evolving, all while preserving the illustrious legacy left behind by Louie Simmons. And I thought, dang, that's kind of the big shoes to fill, Tom. No pressure.
Well, the good thing is, I know you don't fill those shoes. That's probably a reason why I'm here, is that no one else can be Louie Simmons, only Louie Simmons, and to understand what he put down and the legacy he and all the members left behind allowed me to learn and work with the pro athlete section of West Side, and that's kind of aligned us up really luckily to where we're going. It's probably the only time I'll ever tell you that I'm very lucky I wasn't very strong, because if I was in the powerlifting category of West Side, I don't think I would be here today. But it allowed me to see what true strength was. I wasn't going to break any world records, so I didn't have the pressure of the gym and Louie down my neck, so to speak, because that's a pressure cooker in there. But thankfully, he taught me how to think, and here I am today to ensure that we preserve everything he did, and then we add to it as best we can. And back down to, you don't fill those shoes, you just make sure people understand who owned those shoes, who walked in them, how he did it, and hopefully, if I can make a tiny fraction of influence he did, I will have done the best I could at this.
That's spot on. You know, they say we stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's true. And you take everything that he learned in his tenure and your time with him, and he poured into you, I'm sure, everything he could. And then your job is to evolve it as best you can, right? So it was
for sure.
Right. He passed in 22, early 22, right?
March. Yep.
March 22 is right. I came down, I think it was the first time I was there, and it was right around the Arnold. And I remember it was leading up to that weekend, which is huge. And I called over there and sent an email, hey, can I come talk to you? I got questions. And true to the reputation, you're like, sure, come on over. And you just sat down and very generous with your time in the middle of a chaotic week when there's a lot going on. And clearly, if Louie passed away in March, then he's in failing health. And I remember a few months beforehand when I emailed you, I'm looking at a clip or a post on Instagram, and my wife walks by, and I was like, I don't know. She goes, what? I said, well, I'm looking at this post by West Side, and Louie's in it, and you can't tell because I'm not there, but it looks like he has some edema in his legs, and I'm like, he isn't looking so good like he normally does. And so if I'm going to go over there, I need to do that now. And so, one, I was very grateful that you guys are so generous, and it was I actually get to meet him. I missed him, so it's really too bad. But really big shoes to fill. And then a few weeks later, I saw another post. My wife walks by, and I have a home office, and she sees me. I'm like, oh no. Because all I saw was "Do not go gentle into that good night." Mm-hmm. That's that Dylan Thomas poem, right? Mm-hmm. Rage Against the Dying of the Light. And I was like, they're not going to put something out like that. But I started reading the comments or the caption. I'm like, yeah, Louie passed away. And I was like, man, I was close. But I must have procrastinated too long. So you've been in the works, obviously, right up until then,
There
and then
was,
right since then.
yeah, that's when we released Louis' plan. Like that was a big thing. It was very strange. Like if anyone could defy the odds, it was Louis. Like he did everything his way. You're in his universe when you come to West Side, but his mindset was like no others. So he knew something was going on, and he ensured that a close group of us knew. And it's very hard to run interference on Louie Simmons. We used to say to people like, "Hey, he might be here." It's like seeing Bigfoot. You may see him, you may not, and it goes against the reputation of like Louie's always there for people. But he, yeah, he knew he was unwell for a period of time, but that allowed us, sadly, but in his way, he didn't leave anything to failure because he wanted to plan everything, but allowed us to put down where we're going to go. Because we were going to establish a more thorough internship program, athlete program, but then maybe like the last 4 years, his health wasn't the best, and that's when he started coming in here, unleashing all the knowledge of the world, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then I kind of figured out, okay, he's passing on as much stuff as he can and teaching you not regurgitating stuff, but teaching you how to think and how to process information. And that was huge. And right up until March, like until he had to go to the hospital, um, he was still training 3 or 4 times a day. Like he never stopped, regardless. He never strayed from his way. He had his own code he lived by. He didn't stray from it. And yeah, it was it sucks on one side, but then I'd be doing him a disservice if I didn't take everything he left me to execute on and didn't do a good job with it. To where he didn't want any tributes. He didn't. I think a lot of people couldn't understand how we executed upon his passing. Of like people thought we were going to do a big tribute. I'm like, that's not Louis. Louis doesn't want tribute. Doesn't want that. In fact, he didn't want anyone to know he had passed, but we couldn't hold back that information. He wanted everything just to go on for a few days, but like and maybe a few minutes went past. But yeah, but he set us up, and that's where it's nice to know I went over the direction we're going based on his input. That I didn't have to kind of generate this out of thin air. So for us and the team here, like everyone here is here for a purpose, and that's to build on and to make sure people know where Louis came from, the gym came from, the conjugate method, where it originated from, how he evolved it, enhanced it, and then he had that quote. I may have not invented toilet paper, but I'm smart enough to use it. But kind of, they've done that for training. How can we add on to this legacy and kind of the role we come into as athletes' performance? And that, like, there's a bunch of Louis stories, like I'll probably share throughout the way, but he had a saying is that you need enough weights or more weights in your library. That was his thing to sports scientists, to physiologists, and to strength coaches. Well, we've done a pretty good job of showing you the weights. And now we actually get to show you the assessment performance side of to show you how those weights fit in the library. And here's how we get the hierarchy of athletes. Here's how this system people think works for just powerlifters. It's not true. It works for all these different spectrums. Like we're working right now with a pro female volleyball team. Well, that would be blasphemy 10 years ago, but all these athletes came through Westside, and Louis did not care about social media, did not care about any of that. So these athletes that came in and out, no one talked about those stories. And now we can talk about it. Plus, a little Louis fact is that you couldn't produce content or talk about anything you've done if you weren't here for 10 years.
10.
So we had to, 10, that was he never wrote about what he did. He waited 10 years and then he wrote about it. So I came here 2011, 2012. So 2022 was when we could start releasing stuff out, and that's what we're going to do now. But and everyone who is on staff here has 10-year plus experience in what we're doing. And this is staying true to what he put down, because he taught us a lot of things. But like even reading, for instance, like all the books you have behind you, you can read one book and you can let it influence everything you've done or you can read 3 books and see how do they interact and compare, and does that first book make as much sense as it does. So if you read Super Training, Science of Sports Training, and Science of Practice and Strength Training, well, what's the common thing between these books? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? But if you just read Super Training, your whole training is going to fucking change. Your whole, excuse me if I can cuss, but your whole everything is going to change based on that book, and you're not going to be the best coach you can be. He
Sure.
read absolutely everybody's stuff. Anyone who had a competing method, quote unquote, he laughed at that. Like if you're doing something better than us, he wanted to know about it because he was damn well going to use it. Um, but teaching us these things that even in a third level education, like we didn't understand. Like no one teaches you how to cross-reference books together. Like you have a recommended reading list, an essential reading list. And turns out that recommended reading list is where all the gems are. The essential ones is just to pass the test. And he was self-taught, barely got out of high school, but he realized how to cross-reference this because they were all getting torn apart, and he had to do it for his athletes. So back down to the internships, everything at Westside, and anyone who came through that, it was what you made of it. There was no structure. It was chaos ensued. There was first day of Westside. They were lifting so much weight. I was like, what is this place? Then they would get down the main movement and they'd scatter to all different parts of the gym. I'm like, this is crazy. But they all knew their weaknesses. They all knew how to execute, and every athlete knew how to train themselves. And that was the power of Lou. Louie would give you what you needed. He would teach you everything you needed to know, but he wouldn't teach you everything that he knew because he wanted to see what you could give back. Could you solve a problem? Were you a follower? Were you a leader? And then every person got a different Louie because you got what you needed to execute your task. And yeah, it was like I was at the right place at the right time, especially been young enough, not having any family or anything at that time to where I could go down the rabbit hole of Westside as much as possible, which kind of allowed me to see the good, the bad, everything that's necessary to develop you as a coach, and as I guess as in the position I'm in, to where you have to be able to problem solve at a different level. And if you just want to be a yes man or a follower, then this is not going to work for you. You have to understand how a group works. And like we started a podcast, you brought up like working 23, 24-hour days. You have to be in those trenches to understand what a opportunity and a privilege it is to be where we're at, to work with people, to empower athletes, to educate coaches, to give back. And by giving back, they give back to you. And Louis naturally had that, and that's what he passed on.
So, if I remember correctly, you weren't supposed to even be there. You were on your way. It was the All Blacks, right?
I was going to go to New Zealand. That
New
was the
Zealand.
goal. And then I was going to, and then because when you came, we first met, the first book you suggested was Legacy, if I remember.
Right. That's one, yeah.
And, then I was going to go to Athletes Performance, which is now Exos, and then go back and keep working at the college I was at. But I got the email and I can't really turn this down. Had no idea of where or what I was going to stay at. Turned up to Columbus, Ohio, and the email I got, I didn't know if I had to pay for training. I didn't know where I was going to stay. I had no idea what Columbus was like. Turned up, had to find accommodation, got a bicycle, which is terrible because Columbus hates friggin' bicyclists. And like I was just so idiot. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a country kid coming to the United States, and I got a taxi out to Walmart, got a bicycle with a frying pan and a bag of groceries. I'm like, I can find my way back. Tried to cycle back on the highway. Then cops obviously were like, what are you doing? They put the groceries and the bicycle in the back of the car and then brought me back, and they're on the radios just talking to some other one who clearly had Irish heritage, and they got a good laugh out of that. But that's how naive I was when I came here. And I was taken aback, not just by the powerlifters and how strong and intense and dense their training was, but all the other athletes that were there. Like there were Super Bowl winning coaches. I had no idea what football was or the Super Bowl was. but they had Super Bowl rings, and I was like, wow, that's a nice ring, and they're looking at me going like, who the fuck is this kid?
Right.
But those athletes coming in and those coaches, I've never seen anything like it in this very, I would say, there's no sign in the gym. It's in a part of Columbus in the West Side that people wouldn't expect these people to be at, but they're all coming in and out to talk to Louie. And I'm like, okay, there's something special going on here. And if I can help Louie get his message out, and he says share some of this, I'll be kind of paying back what he's given to us. And turns out he loved fighting, and I would say he may be as good as a fight analyst as he was a strength coach. That's how good he knew boxing, especially, and he could like debate boxing with the best of them. And we kind of bonded over that. And yeah, like 2 weeks, 2 years into 12 years, here I am.
What was
So
your
back to the right place, at the right time.
What was your role when you first got there, other than trying to find a place to live with your frying pan?
Uh, I was the intern. That was
The
it.
intern.
Intern, intern do this, intern do that,
Right.
and West Side trains Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday in the morning and the evening. So it was 8 o'clock at that time. It was 8 to about 10, and then it was 5:30 to about 8, and in between was whatever he wanted it to be. And I was like, there is no structure. And at that time, Jordan Syatt was interning the same time, so we clicked up and tried to figure this out. Louis wanted us to go through the special strength certificate, so we did. I would ensure that Jordan would go first, so he would get all the questions wrong, and then Louis would give the answers, and he would ask me, and I would just regurgitate the right answers. So I kind of like kept pushing Jordan out there, and
Jordan's still around?
but oh yeah, Jordan ended up. I mean, he's phenomenally successful. He went back to college because Louis wanted to go back to college. Ended up in Gary Vanderchuk's personal strength coach. Has Syatt Fitness. He's a hugely successful, really, really, really smart guy from nutrition, strength and conditioning, and he's got an addictive personality to where he's a guy you just want to be around, and that's just naturally who he is. That's who he was here. He made the internship fun, and yeah, but we realized that this is what we make of it. Let's pick Louis's brain. Let's see how far we can push the questions. And Louis would give us all the time of the day. So we would go from the gym, we would go to lunch, we'd go back to his house, we would watch fights. And for me, that lasted at least 7 years, 7 days a week. I was around Louie Simmons, to where it
That's a
wasn't
long.
just the gym. So
That's a
it
long
was, but
internship.
oh yeah, well, it never ends because you're always a
Right.
white belt, right?
Right.
Um, Louis would go on trips, and I thought his radio was broken. He would never turn on the radio, music, nothing. So we would go to Knoxville, Tennessee. We would go to it was 8.5 hours. And then when the guys goes, how was the radio? I'm like, oh, it's still broke. They're like, it's not broke. He just doesn't listen to it. And I was like, holy shit. But what I did was I would have a book and I'd ask questions. And it was just like these private one-on-one seminars you would get with Louis, and just pick his brain, and the amount of stuff that came from that. Like our whole basically MMA side and that program, the athlete program, came from those conversations, to where you just join the dots and you're like, okay, to where they don't need to do 4 days, they can do 3 days. And that powerlifters are in a game of uh, being as strong as possible. Athletes are in a game of being as strong as necessary. Like, that's a huge statement, to where it allows you to pivot and explain to people like, hey, powerlifters are in their element. This is their sport. Their objective is absolute strength. An athlete's goal is to acquire skill. So how can I optimize the skill acquisition for an athlete? Well, then I have to create levels of strength that they need and make them more robust and resilient to get through training. Uh, and how do we do that is we give them an extra day. We move from a 4-day system to a 3-day system. That came out of conversations. We'd go to powerlifting meets on a Saturday. That was speed bench. And we'd have to do speed lower, in the morning, speed upper in the evening of Friday. And then a conversation comes out. The Blues like, well, if you could do it in the same day, it would probably carry over to athletes better. And then we just combine it into one mega session, which is now the backbone of our athletes program. All these came from conversations with Lou. And when I reflect back on it, because it's hard to reflect when you're in it, and I assume you can all relate to when you're going through the trenches, it's hard to see the trees from the forest. But looking back on that, like I couldn't ask for a better internship, and I was very fortunate to get these one-on-one time with Lou. And thankfully, I don't shut up. So I would just keep asking question after question after question, and he would just answer away. He would never safeguard anything, but he would want you to ask, and he would give you guidelines. But if you didn't ask anything, he would give you information, but he wouldn't tailor it to what you needed. It was what you made out of it. We saw coaches come and go who didn't do that, and then we saw ones who did, and the ones who did are extremely successful. The other ones didn't capitalize on the information then taught to them. So it was good to see all aspects of it.
When you got there, there was times in Lou's career when he was lifting, and then he was always training, obviously, but not as competitively. And then there's different waves of athletes there. Like Matt Wenning wasn't there all the time. Dimmel wasn't there all the time. The Sweats weren't there all the time. But they're there some of the time. So when you got there, who were the main folks that were training and competing then when you arrived? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget when I walked in. There was Brandon Lilly, AJ Roberts, Jake Anderson, Tony Bolagoni, Richard Douglas, Travis Bell, Tony Ramos. Make sure I said Luke Edwards. Who else? I'm probably forgetting some because I said it too fast.
And they all have all-time world record holders.
Yeah, and they were studs at that time. And then Hoff was in the evening with Joe Mike Jester, Amy Weisberger, Elliot Baum came in, Jimmy Ritchie was there, Sonny Kushner was there. It was. I got to see a very special group, and I think that was the peak of it. AJ and Hoff were kind of going back and forth to where AJ kind of spurred Hoff into this other realm of powerlifting, and Hoff is just he's a freak of nature, and I don't think people understand how strong and how competent that guy is as an athlete and a coach. Jason Coker was coming down
I don't know
at that time too.
They couldn't get that. He's a 3,000 total.
I don't think people comprehend how much weight that is.
Sure. Yeah.
And then the first meet I went to was when Donnie Thompson broke that 3,000 total. I had never seen a human that big. His back, like he had to take up 2 chairs. He was sitting in front of me, and I've never seen a back that thick and that big. To where I was like a little kid seeing a red button, and I'm like, my finger is going towards that back. I'm like, don't do it, Tom. And I just had to just tap him, and he could barely turn around. I'm like, I apologize, didn't mean to do that. But I'm like, dude, he was so wide, he took up 2 seats. And then I was like, this is like, why isn't this everywhere? And then you got to understand the underground aspect of what powerlifting is.
Well, there's not why is that everywhere. Not everyone can do that. Everyone can train hard, sure, but there's only 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and not all 32 are that good on a relative basis.
But you got to think of the exposure the NFL gets. I mean, from an exposure point of view, why is there not thousands of people here? Like, to where this is, to me, is just jaw-dropping weight. And then you realize that to most people, 400 pounds is the exact same as 2,000 pounds. They just can't comprehend what weight is.
They really can't. They really can't. I was really, really mediocre in the strongman world, even in the age groups. And for someone to bench 1,000, and I know that my best yoke carry is 800, and it was everything I had, and then up snapping my foot a week later. it's still 200 pounds. It's still 25% more, and I'm using my whole body and my legs, and someone else is benching it, and
Hmm.
it's very, 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 very humbling. Now, not everyone stays, right? People come and go there, so not everyone has Louie's longevity where he's there in the thick of it because there's mental pain and discomfort in all those sessions trying to get people to advance, or you're advancing yourself. And for what reason, it's not sustainable for 3 and 4 decades at that level, right? Only a few people can even last that long. And most people, a 10-year career in that environment, in that world is really, really something.
Hmm.
How do how do people last that long in something that's so painful day in and day out?
I think that's more of an athlete in that question that they can answer. But from my observations, is that Louis and that generation were different. They're different than most. So, in talking with a lot of the first and second generation West Side athletes, they all still train, they all still interact, and it was kind of like there's these generation differences. But that was just them, like their culture, and like Louis wanted to last the test of time. That was he wanted to be still lifting as far as he could, and made his biggest lift in his late 50s. But in terms of how they do it, I don't know, but I tip my hat to them because it's amazing how much weight that they do and the tonnage that they put in per session is mind-boggling. And then most of these people go out and work a full-time job too. Like a pro powerlifter, there I don't think there is many, if any, making enough money to live a quality of life that they can on powerlifting. They have to work a full-time job,
Sure.
and so then they have to sacrifice training time, especially the morning crew, the evening crew too. But morning crew, you basically couldn't have a job, so you'd either have a third-party job or you would have other occupations that would allow you to train in the morning. And the evening crew, they'd be coming in after work. So like that to me made it even more like amazed because you got people like uh Hoff, Jimmy Ritchie, like they all work manual labor jobs like landscaping, fencing. I think Fred Bolt was a roofer. All these people work manual jobs and they would come in and still crush numbers. So like that added an extra kind of thing that people didn't realize is they go to these meets, crush these numbers, they would go home, and then Monday comes, they're turning up for their job.
Hmm. Just the recovery alone from work, you're stressed. Your nervous system is stressed from work, and then you have to come in and then perform at such a elite level. It still takes all your concentration. Otherwise, you can get really, really hurt bad.
For sure. And like you're turning up to be a member of West Side, no one is forcing you to come in. So you're bringing yourself in depending on what side of Louis you're on, whether it's negative or positive. You're still bringing yourself to the gym. No one's forcing you to turn up. And yet, day after day, they would turn up and execute, do what they needed to do. And that's another amazing thing is like there's no monetary investment or sorry, return for them to keep coming in. Now, Louis would pay the athletes if they put chalk on the board or broke a record, and he'd pay for everyone's breakfast. Like all those stories are true, but to where these people would come in from a hard day's work and would probably go through an even harder workout than the whole day, go home, eat, and go back out. And some of these people too, on top of that, had families, had stuff. So to where, again, I have nothing but huge respect and credit for all the members and everything they put through because they didn't have to, they wanted to.
That buying the breakfast, that's kind of another little legendary thing with Bob Evans out there in Columbus, right? That he was
Mm-hmm.
there every morning. I got to wonder, is that restaurant still around now that Louie's not there? Because
Oh, there's plenty of, but
I can
yeah,
imagine
we,
there was a budget for that was significant.
I think the peak year, Bob Evans, not anywhere else, was $48,500.
48 grand, so 4 grand a month, 1,000 a week almost, right? Um, on Bob Evans
That
alone.
was that was just Bob. That wasn't including, and that was Louis would take care of coaches, would take care of athletes, would take care of lifters. to where like that was a considerable, and that's not including the tip because he would
Right.
always tip in cash. So I only knew because when I was working in the business, I was doing the accounting at that time, and that wasn't Louis trying to flaunt money or so. Like Louis wanted to take care of everyone because he had nothing growing up, and he didn't want people, one, not to have a full meal, but two, the camaraderie and the talking at breakfast was everything to him. And like breaking bread with people to this day for us is still huge. Like it's very important to eat with people, to talk, and the conversations to where Louis would tell a story, and then we would, because I used to sit a lot with Jason Coker. There was the main table here. I would sit over to, it was, you walk into the right hand side, we have a little booth so we could see everything. Louis would tell a story and we'd be thinking, okay, who's the story about? Because it's about someone at this table. And we wanted to see who it was about. We would get it. We would see if they would get it. And then like it was like for a good period of time, like that was phenomenal. And then a visitor would come in and they would come sit, and Louis would spend all morning with them at breakfast, chatting, training, and then after training was over, bring them out for lunch, and that was it. He was so giving with his time, and he wanted to make sure that they had a good and positive experience with him. So it was another thing that he kind of taught you. He led by example.
So your identity gets really hammered in your brain at a young age. And if you read or you say or what you just said, that didn't grow up with a lot of means, he didn't grow up with a lot of money. And from what I understand, he was picked on a little bit. He's a smaller guy, shorter guy, right? And didn't do well in school. So, you fast forward X number of years, he pumps all this knowledge in his brain, and from my assessment, he spends the rest of his life giving everything away. He wants to take care of people, with their food, like you just said, but also monetarily a little bit, and then take everything that he learned and make everybody better, so that when he's gone, they're better without him. Is that a fair assessment?
For sure, that's definitely part of the universe that is Louis. Another thing is, if our business burnt down, he did not care. Like to where he loved the gym, nothing got in the way of empowering athletes and representing. Like that's West Side Barbell, the club. Is that everything he did was to make the club better, and that's why when he passed, and Louis said it, when West Side dies, or sorry, when he dies, West Side dies. And what he was talking about was the powerlifting aspect, because that club was everything. And without Louis, you can't have that club because he was the one that he was West Side Barbell. And to understand that was, as you came in as an athlete, you are signing a contract you don't understand. You are stepping into a universe that everything that's been done is like, what can you do for the club? How can you build onto this? And as soon as that narrative might change, is from what can I do for Westside to what Westside can do for me, people will end up kind of leaving the gym, which naturally happens. And but everything he did was for the betterment of Westside. So if the business got in the way, we had a church and state relationship. The business never went down to the gym at the same time that they were training. The athletes I trained at different times, because you had West Side Barbell Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday mornings, and then the athletes would come in Tuesday, Thursdays, and we'd come in Saturday afternoons and evenings, because that was West Side's time.
And when you say athletes, that's a non-powerlifting athlete. So the
Correct.
pro and college football teams, volleyball, track, the fighters, and all them, right?
Well, and if Louis was working with, he would bring in his athletes with the powerlifting, but I would never dare bring in the athletes I was working with his, because he is the master. It's his gym. And my first 3 months here, I thought, I've got this down. I understand this system. After 3 months, I realized I don't know dick. I don't know shit about this.
Right.
So then 3 years in, I'm like, okay, I'm working with athletes. And that time, most of them was fighters, uh, to where I thought I could bring them in and like train them all the same time we were training, and go run the, like, work for Louis in the business. And then that didn't interact because there's one head coach, that's Louis. And you like, look, whether you like it or not, it's his gym, it's his rules, and you have to understand that you're part of a bigger thing here. So if I wanted to kind of figure out what my coaching style was under his mentorship, I had to do it at a separate time. And like that was pivotal. And it took me 7 years to realize a lot of things. Year seven was when I started to understand his true genius. Because at times I thought he was an asshole when he wasn't. He was just being Louie, to where you don't understand. I didn't have the emotional intelligence to pick up what he was putting down. Uh, and then that just comes with maturity, because he would say all these things that I'm like, dude, you're crazy. Just never is going to happen. And then you give it enough time, you see it happening, and you're like, oh, fuck. Maybe there's some truth to this. And then it repeats itself. And then you're like, there's a saying that the youth is wasted on the youth, and I never understood it until you go through
Mm,
it yourself. You're like, God damn, if I picked that up
there's
when I was 21,
sure.
but there's no point looking in the past. You just learn from it and you go on. And like that was a big thing to understand, that you're coming into this, and the worst thing you could say was you're a powerlifter, because you're held to such a high standard that you better be able to live up to it. So if you try to come to Westside as a powerlifter, like you are held to a criteria that not many other places in the world, if any, would like you could stack up against it. And that's why having the pro athlete, and then he worked with his own track and field athletes, which he brought in, and they would work in amongst the powerlifters because he could figure that out. But I didn't want to disrupt or disrespect him, the system, and him as a mentor and a coach, to where now he would try to come in and derail our workouts with our athletes, which was hilarious. To where I would just have to take that secondary role, step back, and let him do his thing. But that was Louis. Everything was a test of, like, he would give you reasons not to be loyal to see if your loyalty would remain, and then thankfully I never stumbled on that. And then that's where like leaning into books came. Robert Greene's Mastery was a great book to read.
Yep.
The Going back to my own one, was like Louis gave me three books: the Book of the Five Rings, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and Basic Physics. And then going back into that, and then reading Sun Tzu, and like if you're willing to go and immerse yourself into books, you start seeing those books in real life. And to me, that's when everything starts merging together. But I'm probably a little bit slower than most, so it took me 7 years to start to figure this stuff out. But from year seven, maybe seven, to our last like few weeks together was the best, because I could harness everything he was putting down more, because I could conceive it better, to where the lack of maturity didn't allow me to do it. So that was I'm pretty thankful of that.
I talk to people, and whether they're my coaches or athletes or, you know, my own kids or the student athletes that we have a little library in the gym, and it's free books, and I keep restocking it, and I keep putting ones in there. And sometimes it gets utilized, sometimes it gets neglected. And kids will walk by, or I'll tell Lucas, and I'll say, hey, what are you reading right now? Or someone might say, well, I'm not really reading. I'm like, well, you can't be great unless you read. And they're like, what? I said, you can't be great unless you're constantly pumping in information. All you have is what you're given in school, which is just a template. And so, they say as a rule of thumb, there's the 10,000 hours for you to actually be a master in your field of knowledge. But if has total recall and giving you all that information when you're asking him this question about this and that, it could be anything related to physical improvement. He must have pumped in all day, every day for decades to be able to talk at a high level on all those different topics, whether it's speed for the 100, or you run or there's a miler, or there's the power output for a pole vaulter, right? So for him to be able to go from there to fighting, to football, to powerlifting, to CrossFitters, and then Olympic lifting, he must have been pumping it in his head all the time, whether he's talking to other experts or coaches or reading or magazines or all the Russian books that he had to have translated. It's this constant inflow of knowledge so that he can then utilize it in an intelligent way with his business, which was making athletes better. And then, like you said, once you have that knowledge where it's ingrained in you so well, you start seeing that philosophy in everything. You can start seeing the way people add stressors at their job so that they can evolve and improve. When it takes a stressor to improve physically, it takes it to improve mentally. So I can't imagine how much volume he pumped into his head to be able to facilitate growth with all those different athletes.
Yeah, yeah,
There
like
wasn't
it's the
not really a question, but it's just a statement. Yeah,
the the amount he reread books. Like if you've read Super Training once, it's nearly a traumatic experience
yeah, it's not fun.
because no, his Super Training book, like the print was wearing from thumb marks. The spine was gone. He reread it so many times. Science and Practice of Strength Training. Like there's he opened them and reread them so many times. He knew the page numbers of where everything was. The same with Kurz's book. So that was another thing to where a book is not one and done. Like
Sure,
when he was writing, his kitchen at home was books were open all over the place, and he
I
was
know what you're saying.
cross-referencing, doing that, and that's how he would write. And he would write so fast because what should be on page 10 should be on page 2, and page 1 should be on page 4, because it would just flow out. That's why if you read most of our books or the Book of Methods, it's a little bit all over the place because that's how Louis was. And
Right.
he wrote and didn't want it. Of course, he could have had it edited and organized, but that's not who he was, and that's not what he wanted to put out. It's like, hey, let's get this out, let's go, boom. But that's the way his brain worked, and he would go off in tangents and pull himself back in. Um, but I was amazed at not only at the length or the breadth and width he read, but how much he reread the same books over and over again, like the Body Electric, that book. He read that. I don't know how many, like, there's so many books he read and magazines. And that's why I keep going back. There's only one Louie Simmons because he dedicated his whole life to that, to where he had nothing else to do because he didn't want to do anything else. He wanted to be as deeply entwined as a samurai could be in their art, to where that was his way. Anything to do with making people better in terms of strength training, that's all he wanted to do. No vacations, like all that was true. And he had a hierarchy that he knew, and the gym came first in his life. And that's why, like, his wife was phenomenal. Like Doris, like you couldn't ask for a better partner in crime because she understood who Louis was, and that allowed him to be Louis because she took care of all the other stuff that we probably take for granted. Where like Louis didn't care about anything but taking care of the athletes, the gym, Doris, and his dog. That was his universe. You would step in and you might romanticize this life, but like not many people, no one could walk his walk because he literally didn't care about anything else.
People would ask, or my son would be like, how does someone get to be that great? I go, well, depends on how you just define greatness, but that level of expertise, he's 100% out of balance in most other components of his life. So if you say you want to go out with your friends or you want to go to the movies, that's not what he does. He goes and works, or he's reading, or he's training more athletes. He doesn't go to the movies. Like you said, there's no vacations. There's no kids, right? He doesn't have any kids. So you find someone with such a singular focus, and that's how they're at that end of the spectrum. But they're also out of balance in most other things. And you got to decide, is that what you want? Most people say, I want to have a family, or I want to have a job, and I want to lift, or I want to do these things. So you only have so much time in the day, so many resources. And when you find some people that are just singularly focused, then they can do great things in that one area. But it's probably not great things in other areas. There's
Like there's
there's no
trade
time
offs and
limit
everything.
for sure. There's some trade offs. I had someone ask me, how do you explain just the word conjugate or the conjugate system? And I said, well, from my rudimentary background, if you conjugate a verb, it depends on the different tense or if it's singular or plural. So there's a different usage for a verb based on what the overall need is. So if I'm looking at the conjugate system, well, if it's a speed day, we're going to waive the different speeds over 3 or 4 weeks because there's a different need over 3 or 4 weeks. And then you make most of your money with all your accessories. So you have to conjugate. You have to use different accessories for different people based on what their different needs are. So that's how I would say they're using the word conjugate because they waive things on speed days and they tailor the accessories to you to what you need. So it's different based on what you need. Is that how they came up with it? I have no idea. But if it helps you understand how I'm programming this for you, that's how I'm applying it. So then the question is, why the word conjugate?
If you look at the history where this came from, right? So the Soviet Union is the origination of this, and it was a system of training used for athletes once they reached a level of uh, ownership and understanding of training to excel in their given sport. And the the conjugate method is really a conjugate system because it's a system of all different methods intertwined to give you the results you need to get. It allows for maximum adaptability. Now, I would love to have the skill set to put it in this nice little box with a bow on top of it that someone could eat and digest it and go, that's it.
Gotcha.
But the fact of the matter is, conjugate method or system is what you need it to be. It allows for maximal adaptability. And at the end of the day, you know how fast you are, how strong you are, where's your weakness, what you need to do, and how to improve upon it. And you have this very fast feedback loop. And so, whatever way you can give it to someone to digest the information, that's the correct way to say it. And to know that to have the freedom to choose what you want to do within training is not as freeing as people think. You can get paralysis by analysis of so much choice. So that's where having an understanding of a hierarchy of what you need is hugely important to get the most out of the system. And that's why it's when people dispute training methods, right? I think we can all boil it down to that there's two ways to train. There's training correctly and training incorrectly. None of us in this game want to train incorrectly, right? We want to empower our athletes, make them the best they can be, and then execute. I don't think there's anyone who would go against that statement. So then what we're all talking about is training efficacy. Who has the most effective training method? Because there's multiple ways. I think we've all worked with enough athletes. We've seen different ways that they are getting good results, right? So let's look at injury rates. Let's look at outcomes. Let's look at skill acquisition, and let's look at maximum adaptability. If your training system or method has specific guidelines in terms of there's no allowing for different accessories, there's different phases, well, then the more adaptable training system should be more effective when done right. So I think a lot of the time we get lost in this, well, my system is better than your system. Well, if we're doing stuff right, we're all using good systems. Just which one is more effective for that athlete at that time. This is why I don't like to get into this system versus that system. If you've got a really good system, I'm going to figure out what is the best parts of it. How can I use it within our system along with everything else? For that's my job as a coach, is to get the interpretation of your system, put it in. And back to conjugate, it allows you to pull of the best parts of everyone else's training system. Because Zatsiorski, a genius, Verkhoshansky, genius, Kurz, genius, Tudor Bompa, all super smart guys, had all different methods to where you could follow their ways and have success, or you could try take the best parts of everyone's stuff and put it into a system. And that's what, to me, conjugate allows for maximum interpretation and adaptability for what your athlete needs. And I go back to, I wish I could give a little short answer, but it's really nuanced, and the worst answer to give is it depends, right? Context is king, but
Sure.
that's what this is. You need to understand it.
Yeah, I get in the rut. Well, I answer a lot of my questions with "it depends," and I have to give a longer answer after it. So
Yeah.
I usually start there with with athletes. You pointed out that the powerlifters, they're trying to move the most weight they can.
Mhm.
And an athlete that plays in another sport other than powerlifting, they're trying to move enough weight so it enables them to perform their sport at their highest level, right? So when I tell people, let's say you play football, because it's an easy example, you should be able to at least bench 100 pounds. Why? Because you can't really press against any. Everybody's gonna be more than 100 pounds. You gotta be able to press that. Well, Jim, do I need to bench 200, 3, 4, 5? I said, well, then it kind of depends. So I'm gonna give them a range so that at this level, you have to have this level of strength. So you have to be able to push and exert force. Do I need you to be a 500-pound bencher? No. Do you need to be more than a 100-pound bencher? Yes. Let's see how you perform in your sport, and you're getting knocked around. All right, we need some more upper body strength. What I struggle with is I see athletes, whether in high school or college, and they'll go to school for 4 or 5, 6 years with a COVID year, and their play on the field is the same, their results are the same, and their numbers in the weight room are the same. I gotta ask, how do you go to school for 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, and your numbers are all the same? Your job is to improve. And I see that more and more times, and it's frustrating. And so when you deal with athletes, do you encounter that? Do you encounter people that, like, hey, they're just stagnant, and they're saying this can't be optimal for me? But sure, you got to have people they have to be evolving all the time. Otherwise, they're not winning. They're getting pushed around, or they're not fast enough, or they're not making enough plays. And I'm like, well, you got to move the needle in these 6 areas. So how do you handle that when you come across these athletes that are stagnant in the college or pro level?
I'm going to hit you back with it depends, right?
Sure, right? Sure, right.
Um, one, let's just break down the coaches working with the athletes in that they are getting the right answers to the wrong questions sometimes. That they truly believe what they're doing is correct
Sure.
and their execution is correct. But the problem we see is like you're not asking the right questions. And that completely changes the game of training. Then, two, with the athletes, there's different levels of athletes. If you make it to the NFL, you are part of a pool of people who has genetic potential out the wazoo, right? To where really, like, outside of personality matches, these athletes are gifted and they're going to get good. So your goal is to make sure they don't get injured, right? There's very little that I'm going to do from a strength perspective to increase their chances of getting better skill wise. They're just that gifted. So I'm just trying to create the right questions to keep them injury free and to try help them raise or reach their genetic potential if they want to. Then you have this other group of people who will give you absolutely everything, but they're not genetically gifted. And that's where, like, okay, we are going to give you everything we can to see if we can raise your level of physical literacy and body awareness to hopefully help you acquire more skill. Because some of these genetically gifted people, skill comes naturally to them, playing ball comes naturally to them. They don't have to think. They may have some problems reading plays, but that quickly comes up. You can have these guys who don't have that skill but understand every aspect of football and play possible. They just can't execute in the field, and that may be a central nervous inhibition. It might be a cognitive inhibition, and we'll try knock out as much stuff as we can there. And back to we're going to ask them the right questions, give them the best opportunity to get in there. But then there's some athletes too who just don't want to do stuff, and they're stagnant. And like, I don't know why I'm stagnant. Well, you just don't want to train. And here's where our philosophy is a little bit different. And I was just had a great talk with a strength coach called Anthony Schlegel, to where you're really making your money as a strength coach, not training the best athletes in the world who want to train. Like, that's simple. They're going to do their own thing. Is to where your money's worth as a coach is getting through and working with the athletes who don't want to train, who don't want to turn up. Like, that's what we're in this profession get paid to do. Is like, how do we communicate? Because it's a communication issue. They're talented or whatever. Like, how can I get them on board with this system? And you have to want it more than them and have to have them buy in. And sure, there's going to be one or two who'll slip through the cracks who you just don't gel with. But the stagnation of athletes, I don't fault the coaches, because I think most strength coaches and whatever type of coach is working with them truly want the best for their athletes, because they all want to be successful. They just don't assess the questions they're answering or they're asking. So then they're getting all these answers correct to the wrong questions. So that was a huge shift in our perception. And then two is, you're working with football players. I want you to get better at football, not the weight room. The weight room is just a tool. It's just a
Sure.
cog in this whole big engine. And I have to understand my role, and I have to understand the feedback mechanism of that. I should be talking to every other coach I can to say, hey, how are they doing on the field? How's their nutrition? What's happening in their personal life? What's going on here? Have they got exams? All this stuff plays into how you work with someone. Like, hey, they probably shouldn't do this today. And it's easier for me to say that in the private sector, because we have a bit less red tape. And when you're working with teams and you got logistics against you, you got 50, 60 kids, it's hard to do this. And that's where my vision is slightly skewed, I guess. But holistically, you have to figure out, okay, they're stagnant for a reason. What is that reason? You don't play the blame game. You don't blame other coaches. You don't blame them. You just go, let's do a root cause analysis, an RCA, which we got that from manufacturing, of like, hey, we have to
Right.
pinpoint where is this breakdown in this loop. And then we have to put in tools and empower them to go, okay, here's what you need. Talk to the coaches that they're working with, see if they're open to communication. And so that's kind of a long-winded, it depends answer to that. Hopefully that answers it for you.
That part that's, with the knowledge component, because I asked you 6 different questions in this questionnaire before you even started this, and one was about mindset, one was about knowledge, and one was about teammates. On the knowledge piece, um, you said what you know is limited, what you don't know is limitless. Listen more, talk less. And for you to get those athletes to work with you, sometimes what I find, you need to work on building trust so that they actually listen to what you say, right? And if you're working with athletes at Westside and you said you weren't a power lifter, and people walk in and they're like, well, Tom, what do you know? You didn't lift like those guys. So then you have to demonstrate enough knowledge so they think, all right, well, Tom probably does know something about what the hell he's talking about. But at some point, either early on or in the middle or at the end, but there's always that give and take with that relationship where the athlete sometimes is like, I know more than you, Tom. You don't know shit. You're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's a challenging dynamic that's always in flux, whether it's a rookie, a veteran athlete. How do you bring that athlete back in so they, like you said, your challenge is to get them to perform? Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they don't believe in you. Maybe they think you're wrong. How do you move the needle to get them still to perform? Then that's hard.
Oh, for sure. And it's communication. Maybe I am wrong.
Sure.
Maybe like that's, and if I am wrong, like, tell me where I'm wrong. How can I improve? Uh, then you're like, maybe this is not a knowledge based issue. Maybe this is a personality based thing. Maybe my personality doesn't gel with your personality, which is completely fine. It's going to happen. Like, there's people out there who like me. There's people out there who dislike me. That is the world. That is the way this works. If I have everyone who likes me, then I'm probably not doing my job correctly.
Sure.
But is to where, like, you have to understand personality and culture. I have to understand that every athlete is different, and I have to train them as their own entity in person, because how I grew up is very different how others grown up, and that perception dictates the reality that they're in. And trying to understand more about them is huge. And then to where, if you exhaust communications, to where I tend not to burn bridges, because they're hard to rebuild
Man,
back up.
sure.
But I have to be mature enough to go, hey, this is not going to work. I wish you the best, and like, here is other resources and people that might go in, or and anyone is welcome to leave at any time. I don't think there's many people who can execute the level of intensity we can execute at. So that's why I've got no problem sharing information and working with other people. Um, but yeah, to where it comes back down to solid, honest, open, transparent communication. To where I don't know everything. I don't know what you're feeling. Sometimes I don't understand the terminology. Like nomenclature, trying to establish baseline nomenclature between people to, like, hey, here's what I'm saying, here's what this means, is very important. Because depending where you're from, how you grew up, you use different language than, like, you work someone from, I don't know, from Arkansas, and then you might work someone from Canada. Like their language and interactions and upbringing and um, their social interactions are completely different, and it's up to you as a coach to understand that and to get a baseline level of communication and understanding so you can actually communicate effectively. And there's people who've come in here that have went through that, like, hey, this is not working for me. I don't think like you're a fit or this is going. Like, okay, well, tell me where you think it's going wrong. Can I improve it? And normally it boils down to it's a personality issue, to where they just don't like your personality, and to where it's not because you're an asshole, it's just because you don't click with their vibe, and that's equally as important as what you know.
Yeah.
And to understand you don't have to work with everyone is a big thing. And that's why we're pretty lucky in that we can be respectfully but bluntly honest with athletes and not in fear of our business going under because we have to say yes to bring in money. And that's what Louis realized. I think it's very important to where you have to be in a position to tell the truth and be objective at all times.
If that's coming from the point where you have the same goal and it's make that athlete better, then they're going to see through that. They're going to see that really quickly. And if it's, hey, I'm doing this for something, some other purpose, people see through that real quickly as well. So it always comes back to, I'm telling you to do this because I'm trying to get you better to do that, then you got a better shot. And if you keep bringing it back to that, which then it needs to be tied to their overall why. I need to get a scholarship, or I need to play in the pros, or I need to win, or I need this money, or whatever. I need to hit this all-time world record. If you keep tying that, we're trying to get you to that target, and this is why I'm saying this. Then you got a better shot. You still got to solve the problem though too. In not you still got to say, hey, you still have to diagnose and say this is what we're doing next, and get them to do it. One time I asked you, what are some characteristics of people that are at the highest level, whether it's a powerlifter or a pro, and you said obsession, that they're obsessed with every little detail. And to have a 1,000 pound, plus squat or bench or deadlift, you have to be obsessed because it takes so much built in there to get you to that weight, or to play, like you said, at the NFL. Some people are gifted. Some people just have to be really great in every other component of their life to still be on the field. But it takes so much volume. Like, what are some obsessed examples that people might not understand that a college pro or elite level athlete goes through or encompasses for them?
Within the spectrum of pro athletes, there's different levels, right? So the people that I've had the privilege of meeting and work with that are at the upper level of pro, they are in pursuit of perfection, even though they understand that doesn't exist, but they're willing to pursue it anyway. And that pursuit of perfection or excellence, whatever you want to call it, can for some be borderline deemed insane, right? To where they're so obsessed at what they're going after and they want pure and utter perfection. They know perfection doesn't exist, but they still want to aim for it. And somewhere in the back of their mind, it exists for them. And that what separates the best, or sorry, the world record holders, the top end, from this other pool of genetic freaks. These athletes are absolutely in pursuit of this, and they expect everyone around them to have the same North Star of, like, as a coach, you have to be in pursuit of perfection as the coach, because if you're not aligned with who they are. And understanding that will help you as a coach, because they're going to question everything. They're not questioning you. They're going to question that this is aligning with their pursuit. And then you have to go from I think to I know. Like, I think this exercise is going to work. Like, I know this exercise is going to work. They don't have time for you to think. They want you to know They want you to give them the right information at the right time, and so that they can understand it, because time is so precious to them. And I deeply respect that. And to me, like, that is a big standout between professional athletes. And then some understanding how they learn is huge. Some are tactile, some are verbal, some are visual. Whichever way they need to train, you have to deliver that message in that way. But back to these athletes, is like, they see things differently, and they expect the same out of the people they work with than they do out of themselves. And that's a huge thing.
And it being a huge thing for me means those people are so outside the bell curve. They're such an outlier for most of the other folks in the world. So when those other folks are in their lives, there's disconnect. They don't get it. They don't understand me. I'm different. I'm weird, right? That dude's obsessed. Yeah, that dude's insane. That dude's fucked up. People will say, or because they're not understood because they think so differently. They're so singularly focused, and when people are around them and they're not, then they're just like, well, I don't want to be around those folks anymore, or they don't get it, or that dude sucks, or dude's an asshole. And then so that's real trying on just standard relationships. You might see that with at home or the people at work, like that really separates people. So like if I know one of the questions I asked, what's your favorite sports movie? You said The Last Dance. Well, Tim Grover talks about that all the time. About you're different.
Mm-hmm.
You're completely different than everybody else, and you don't fit in very well. And just get used to it, because you're gonna be kind of alone until you find someone else like you. Then it's like, holy cow, man, where you
Mm-hmm.
been? It's a lonely journey for a lot.
For sure, it can be, until you surround yourself with the right people.
And then
And
when that
sadly, some of
happens,
these people,
it's just there's so much magic that happens. Then it's so fun.
you have a support system. I think if you look at the way a lot of pro athletes are going, they have their own independent team nowadays. Like, more people are putting out content. Look at Miles Garrett, right? Look at the video he put out showing his own sports science team. I'm like, look at the year he's having. They're they're moving from seeing themselves just as a pro athlete, as that they're a business. They're the CEO of their own body. So I need to have a team to work on my investment here. I need to have like-minded people that align with my goals, that cover my back. That's why you need a team to hire in this day and age, for sure, because you're part of an industry. You run a business, and the business is you. So you want to have people who align with your values, and you have to fail fast, fail forward, and fail often, kind of a thing. To where once you get the right people in there, boom, you're good to go. And I think the COVID may have expedited that with athletes, to where, like, hey, I need a coach to work with me because I need a gym when I couldn't train. Now pro athletes are going like, hey, I've signed a contract for X amount of dollars. If I don't have a healthy body, I can't execute on that contract. So I have to ensure that I've got my own team. I can't rely on the franchise I work with or these people to give me the individual aspect that I need. So you need to have someone else to cover your back. And I think when you get that team together, that's when you see magic happen.
Yeah, the whole "it takes a village." One of the chapters in the book I'm working on it. Entitled it "Building the Machine," and then I refer to the athlete as the machine because, like a car, there's so much that goes into it. There's the building it itself, but then there's the maintenance, and then there's just putting fuel in it. So I talk to like some college kids, and I say, what's your stipend, per month for all your expenses as a scholarship? And they're like, $1,400. And I said, all right, so what are your expenses? And they tell me it's this much for rent and this much for food. So all that's covered. I said, so how much do you net? Like, you have your going out money. So how much do you have left over? And like $300 or $400. And I said, okay, we talked about how much protein you need to, take in. Is your protein in your supplements, is it set up on auto ship so that's always there, so you have a plan? And they're like, no. I said, well, you're given this money. Like, the pro athlete is given so much money. You need to then set up your machine around you so that you can perform at your highest level. And if you're not getting enough food in the dining hall or wherever you're eating at home, then you need to bring in more resources and you have extra money. So use that. And then you need to build the nutrition component of your machine. So you look at Myles Garrett, like you said, or LeBron James, they have a team of people. They got live-in chefs. They got masseuses all the time, right? There are people helping them with their meditation and their massage. It's like, oh my goodness, because to do more takes more. You said with those guys, the powerlifters, when you showed up in the first day, they had to have a big lift, but then the overall tonnage of weight that was being moved throughout the session was critical so they could move their overall objective, which was their total. So to be a better athlete, it takes more. What it took for you to bench 100 is going to take more to bench 200 for you to be a peewee football player. It takes more to be a college football player. And then you can't do it alone. So you need to get your head wrapped around the idea that to get to the next standard takes more. What does more look like? Well, it's all these different components. You have to set yourself up. So that becomes overwhelming sometimes, but honestly, it's only one of the few fun things I like to do. So West Side's going forward. I got to just one or two more questions. And if I just look at the site itself and the people that you have, and given that Louie's legacy is education, and you guys are pumping out content all the time. There's snippets on social media, and there's courses you can take, and you said revamping courses, and you have a team of people. Like, this is really the crux of what West Side seems to be, other than working with their athletes, just constantly pumping out information to get people better. How do you coordinate all that? That is such that is such a huge endeavor. What does that look like for you guys, in the next 12, 24 months?
One, I'm very fortunate of the team we have, and I'm only as good as like my right hand guy, which is like Harold runs the day to day of the business aspect, and without him and Kyle, Mac, Megan, Kelly, like this whole team we've got together here, Burley, like everyone who contributes hugely, and that's just like we've got an advisory board we run through with the athletes, which will release next year when most of the stuff will be shown on the website. But you're only as strong as the team, and to where I try to empower and delegate and decentralize where possible, and to where I trust everyone 100% with what they do. And having that is pretty huge, and hiring the right people and then letting go of the ones who don't and trying to let them go as fast as possible is the best thing you can do. And so it's a coordinated effort, and we just have a really good communication system on the back end, so everyone knows who's working on what, and they understand how it affects everyone. Because if someone writes a piece of content and it sells a product, they have to understand what that does to the back end, to the people here fulfilling it. So everyone knows what they do affects everything, and we're small enough to ensure that those feedback loops are very tight and fast. Two, we have a lot of SOPs in place to ensure that there is guidelines for our brand and our business that people know they can operate within. So if they have a question, they can read this document and go, okay, yep, this is in. And if not, it escalates up or down. But to me, like, this is all because of the team we have here. We can do what, like, if it was just me, like, we would not be who we are, for sure. Very fortunate, the guys and gals we have, and that helps steer the ship in the direction we are going.
And Burley Hawk, that's his God-given name, really? Because for people, not everybody knows him, right? His name is Burley Hawk.
It's the most fitting name, and I don't. What people don't understand is Burley may be one of the strongest humans on earth. He is an ungodly. Yeah, he's an unbelievable coach. Like, his understanding of exercise science, strength conditioning is unbelievable, and so he contributes a whole lot to our content and question and answers and day-to-day discussions. But it's not just powerlifting. He understands sports, and he understands how to make humans better. and like you couldn't put a more fitting name to the man, like for sure.
That's amazing. When I was there in a lot of pictures, I always see the dumbbells, and they look like someone just regurgitated them all in a big pile for no discernible reason.
Hmm.
Is that still the case? Because there's got to be a more
We
effective way to have dumbbells, but there's no way people ever clean that up because that would be like counterintuitive to the culture there because that's all chaos. You have
there
hundreds of pounds of dumbbells in a corner over here that people use, and then you said Louie's all over the place, and then now you're running the show and things are very very structured with SOPs. So are the dumbbells still a
there's two
mess?
West Sides. Of
Okay,
course, there's West Side Barbell. There's the gym. It is the exact same way as it was when Louis was here. That will not be touched. It's there for visitors to come check out, get a workout in, see the place that made the legacy, understand and feel the soul that's in that building. And then we got Westside HQ, where we have our performance assessments, where we have the more structured aspect of the brand where it's going. So again, our goal is to always show people where the legacy came from. That gym has soul and spirit, and nothing new or anything will be added to that. It is the way it is. The rules, to me, that's part of the way I can pay back my mentor. Like, hey, here is the way he had it. This is his way. Who am I to try change that? You can't. And I can't take that away from visitors, people who want to come see that aspect of Westside. So when we work with pro athletes, through our assessments and training, we have a different location for that because I'm not going to interrupt that for that reason. Because two, my OCD will kick in to where like I need to have rigid. But the great thing with Westside is it allows me to be free of that. I understand what this place is, and when we train in there, there's an expectation. So thankfully, we've got Westside HQ where our performance assessments go, and we have the newer, shinier equipment, and it's clean. It's not too sterile, but compared to Westside, it's like a
nice.
surgical bay. But yeah, so that's where when people come to visit Westside, they get that experience. Like that is there. There's still athletes in there throwing weight around, doing the things that Lou wanted them to do, and then we have the separation over here.
What if one of your athletes, or what if Burley hits a number on the platform and it would qualify to replace someone else that's on the West Side board? Would that even occur?
No.
You know what I'm talking about? The
Yeah,
West
that
Side board.
board, nothing changes. Yeah,
Nothing changes on the
not
boards.
one person will touch that board.
Gotcha.
Whoever is on that board, they're immortalized for the rest of the time. The same with the club sheets. There, I am like you will have to get rid of me from here to go against my mentor and the legacy and everything he set forth. Like I am loyal to a fault. But for Lou, like no, like it's a great achievement. You've achieved something for yourself. But West Side Barbell is the powerlifting gym, and that culture was only when Louis was around because he made it that. That was him. So no new chalk on the board. Whoever got on there are immortalized forever in our legacy and history. The same with all the elite lifters. Um, and that's
Gotcha.
really it. It's pretty simple.
Anything else before I'm going to run through some real rapid fire questions at the end and then wrap things up? Anything else you want to share? Or because we'll do like I know I want to be
No,
respectful of your time. All right. You said what do you listen to when you're actually training for yourself? What do you listen to?
I can't even remember that. Did I play on shuffle?
Yeah, you sure did. Yeah. So
Yeah,
whatever.
that's where I just let the iPod just or the iPhone go for whatever it takes me, however how bad or good it is.
Favorite sports movie? You said Last Dance. Favorite sport or athlete? You respect them all. Favorite book though? I thought you would say the Five Rings. I had Shane Sweat on last week, and he said a book of the Five Rings. But Essentialism: The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown. I have that. I bought that, but it's in my queue to read. I haven't read it yet. Why is that one of your favorites?
Completely changed how I interact with life.
Okay.
It it taught me the value of time more so. And two, I think when you ask anyone what their favorite book is, it's most recent book that made the biggest impact in their life, right? If you had talked to me 3 years ago, it would be a different book, the same. But for now, to me,
You still there, Tom?
that
Oh, there
can
he
you hear
is.
me?
Yep.
Yeah. For me, like that book made a inflection point in how I treat time. So it's the one that's made the biggest difference in the last few years.
Favorite lift? You wrote sleds. And if you had all the money in the world, you keep doing what you're doing. And your favorite quote: "Weak things break." So it's
For
one of
sure.
Louie's favorites. It's on one of his shirts.
Mhm.
One of the guys I lived with, he said he was getting that tattooed on his arm. I said, "Well, think long and hard about that. You don't want to be
Yeah,
tempting fate and have your arm broken." Um, Tom, thanks so much. Love to have you on in the future. Talk to some other folks
for
on your
sure.
staff as well. So again, this is the third time I've interacted, two times, and each time I've asked and you've given generously as a testament to the culture there in which you came from. It's I've always learned more, and very very grateful and thankful. And I try to reciprocate and pass on and just emulate the same habits that and courtesies you've given me. So again, thank you so much. I truly appreciate the time together.
Same here. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.